So in this video I'm going to be covering intro to polygon modeling. What is going to be important here is that you have to start kind of thinking about the world in a different way. We need to start thinking about how we can deconstruct the objects in our environment in easy to follow primitives. So what I'm saying here is that if I have a good tidy planning of models, I can basically start making them out of super simple geometric shapes. If I take this shotgun, I can just deconstruct it in a couple of cylinders, rectangles, elongated circles, and stuff like that. So what you need to be thinking of whenever you're planning a model is that if an object doesn't exist the way that a basic primitive would exist, how would you make it out of basic primitives? How would you make it out of simple circles, triangles, and stuff like that? Planning a model is going to be really crucial for saving some time down the road. If we start with a really good base geometry, then modeling something is going to make our life super easy. If we start with the wrong primitive, then it's going to make it a little bit more complicated. In here you may think that this helmet can be started from a sphere, but truth be told, if we started the geometry based out of a sphere, we're going to have a lot of trouble trying to create some indentations on this area. On the other hand, if we start this with a cube, we can arrange the subdivisions in such a way that they are going to be aligning with the object. For sure, a sphere looks like a great idea right here at the beginning, but the rest of the shape is going to be super complicated if you try to continue that trend. So it is really important to choose where to start from in the first place. We're going to be working with relative dimensions. Inside of Maya, you're basically just going to say, I have a couple of units and I want to move X amount of units to just make the size of the helmet. But these engines are going to have a specific way to translate that into real world measurements. Most of the time, we're going to be working with meters and centimeters and such. Not so much in feet and other measurements that are not really part of the international set of measurements. So for now, you can just think about the numbers inside of Maya as being whatever you feel more comfortable with. But at the end of the day, they are going to get translated to millimeters or centimeters coming out of the mesh. So when we're planning a model, we can just break it up into multiple parts. It's not necessary that everything is a single model or a single piece, so long all of these things belong together. Now, as you can see here, I have this part of the hilt that is completely separated from the original mesh, the same way that the blade is separated from the original mesh. The issue here is that if we try to animate this like if it was a character, the mesh itself is going to be intersecting with other parts of the mesh, and that is going to be causing some complications. If it's something that is just going to be a prop that is stuck in the world somewhere and is not going to be moving or creating any deformations, then chances are that I can just get away with having multiple pieces. But it is going to depend on a per model basis. On the other hand, if I'm going to have something that is going to be animated by joints, in particular like a character that is going to be moving arms or extremities, then most likely you want to have them in as a single mesh, because when you start modifying it, the faces that were intersecting the original mesh are just going to be very noticeable. So we're gonna try to make everything out of a single shape, but at the beginning, once you're getting the practice onto how to break these characters up, we are gonna be letting you do multiple pieces with no issues. You need to be thinking in terms of how many polygons am I willing to spend or invest in a particular feature of my character. So in the case of this statue, even though it seems that this is a single piece, the rock itself is going to have a lot of different, let's call them holes and deformations that you need to be aware of, that are not going to be using that much space, but they're going to be generating definitely a lot of vertices. Whereas an area like in this leg, for instance, you can get away with a really large cube coming out of this shape. So it is entirely up to you how you want to divide the geometry, but it's going to be really important that you have this plan ahead of time. So The thing that we're going to be starting working with is going to be basic primitives. Maya is going to be coming up with a lot of different primitives that you can just modify and stretch and adjust to generate some shapes. For instance, in here, we're going to be working with cubes and sphere most of the time. In some cases, we want to work with cylinders, but the other shapes are going to be more of a per base case. The most two useful ones are going to be definitely the sphere and the cube, and among all of those, the cube is going to be the most useful one. So we need to start thinking about how to deconstruct this shape. In this case, I have a table and I can just take a simple cube and squash it in such a way that the top part is going to be forming the top of the table. And for the legs, I can just take another 4 cubes and stretch them out and assign them in such a way that they are going to be, forming this part of the table. For this lamp, I'm going to be taking a big cylinder on the top, a couple of cylinders going down, and then a couple of spheres, and that is just going to be able to create that leg lamp that I have here. The camera seems to be a little bit more complicated, but if you think about it, it's really just a cylinder extruding out of a cube, and it has some deformations on the top that I can probably just get away with another cube stretch in this top part. There are going to be definitely shapes that are going to be way more complicated to just break down into pieces. This one is definitely a torus with a couple of cubes and a cylinder coming in, but this shape down here or here on the top is not really an easy shape to think about. But if I was going to be modeling this thing, probably I'll start with a cube. I'll just extrude it and then move part of the cube up. And we're going to be doing that in future classes and exercises. The same with this hydrant, basically just a cylinder here, couple of cones on the top. Instead of being pointy at the end, they're going to have another cube sticking out of them, and the same goes with these other cylinders that are sticking out of the main cylinder. So it's all a matter of how you're going to be breaking up your faces, but we're going to have to get some practice definitely in order to get to this point.